My mother, a top commodities trader, told me my art history degree was worthless and threw me out. Last night, that worthless knowledge discovered a lost art collection that just sold for $32 million. My commission check is more than she made all year. My name is Sienna, I'm 28, and tonight, I am standing on the stage at Christie's auction house in Chicago, watching the art world absolutely lose its mind. The auctioneer's hammer just came down on the final painting in a collection I discovered, a lost masterpiece from a forgotten artist. The final bid, $12 million. The total for the entire collection tonight surpassed $30 million. The room is a blur of flashing cameras and thunderous applause, but my eyes are fixed on one person in the front row. My mother, Miranda, one of the most ruthless and powerful commodities traders in the city, is staring at me, her face a mask of pale, frozen disbelief. I lean into the microphone, letting a small, genuine smile play on my lips. "I'd just like to thank my mother," I say, my voice carrying across the silent, stunned room. "If you hadn't thrown me out on the street for being useless, I never would have found them. This isn't just an art discovery. This is one of the most creatively satisfying family revenge stories you will ever hear." Before I explain the look of shock on my mother's face, or how her narrow definition of worth made me a multimillionaire overnight, we need to go back. Back to a time when the only thing I owned was a passion she was determined to destroy. If you've ever had a passion that your family just didn't understand, or called a waste of time, just type what that passion is in the comments. I want to see what beautiful dreams this community is built on. My mother, Miranda, operates in a world of pure, cold numbers. Her office on the 40th floor of a Chicago skyscraper overlooks the river, a glass and steel fortress where she built her reputation as one of the city's most feared commodities traders. To her, an object's worth is its market price, period. A painting is just a speculative asset, like a stock. A beautiful old building is just real estate waiting to be flipped for a profit. Emotion, history, sentiment, these are liabilities in her world, weaknesses to be exploited in others, never indulged. I was her greatest liability. From a young age, it was clear I was my grandfather, Julian's girl. He was a passionate, gentle man who had collected art, not for its investment potential, but for its stories. He taught me to see the world differently, to find the beauty in a faded brushstroke or the history in the patina of an antique chair. He saw my desire to study art history not as a frivolous hobby, but as a continuation of his legacy. My mother, his own daughter, saw him as a sentimental fool who'd wasted a fortune on dusty old canvases. My father, a quiet university professor, was caught in the middle, a gentle soul completely eclipsed by my mother's formidable personality. He supported my passion in quiet ways, a knowing wink at a museum, a book left on my pillow, but never dared to challenge her openly. In our luxurious Gold Coast apartment, there were no sentimental objects, only expensive, important modern art that served as a status symbol. I was the art historian in a house that had no soul, the daughter of a woman who measured worth in profit margins and saw my entire worldview as a rounding error in her ledger. Every family has its own currency, doesn't it? The currency of money or the currency of meaning. Type trader if your family values the bottom line, or type artist if they value the story behind things. I'm so curious to see the mix we have here. The Cold War between our two worlds finally erupted into a full-blown battle the month I graduated from Northwestern University with a master's degree in art history. I had graduated with honors, my thesis on the restoration of 19th-century Impressionist works winning a departmental award. I was proud. My mother, Miranda, was appalled. She summoned me into her sleek home office, the one with the panoramic view of Lake Michigan, and closed the door. This wasn't a celebration, it was a performance review. "I've indulged this little art fantasy of yours for long enough, Sienna," she began, her eyes not leaving the flickering numbers on her Bloomberg terminal. "You have your degree. It's a nice line on a resume. Now it's time to get a real job." She slid a folder across her glass desk. It was an offer for an entry-level analyst position at a rival commodities trading firm. "I called in a favor," she said. "You start in 1 month. Or you're out." "Out?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Out of this apartment. Out of my financial support. Out of my life, until you decide to stop being a liability and start generating a profit. Her words were as sharp and clean as a scalpel. I looked at her, at this powerful woman who saw my dreams as a bad investment, and for the first time in my life, I didn't flinch. No, I said quietly but firmly. I won't do it. She finally looked at me then, her eyes cold and devoid of any maternal warmth. Fine, she said, turning back to her screen as if I had already ceased to exist. The doorman will have your things brought down to the lobby in an hour. I suggest you find somewhere else to stay. There was no argument, no shouting, just a cold, clinical severing. I had been liquidated from her life as easily as a bad stock position. An hour later, I was standing on a windy Chicago sidewalk on East Lake Shore Drive with 2 suitcases, a box of art books, and the crushing realization that I was, for all intents and purposes, homeless. My father, when I called him, was full of quiet, helpless apologies but offered no real help, his fear of my mother outweighing his concern for me. I spent the first week on a friend's couch before finding a tiny, third-floor walk-up apartment in a neighborhood far from the gleaming towers of downtown. My new life was a world away from the one I'd known. I traded 5-star restaurants for instant noodles and the manicured lawns of the Gold Coast for the cracked sidewalks of my new street. I found a job at a small, struggling auction house, the only place willing to hire someone with my degree for slightly more than minimum wage. My work was anything but glamorous. I spent my days in a poorly lit basement, cataloging the remnants of other people's lives. Tarnished silverware, moth-eaten furniture, boxes of yellowed letters. It was humbling, exhausting work, a daily reminder of how far I had fallen. Every night, I would come home to my small, cold apartment, my hands smelling of dust and old paper, and I would think of my mother in her penthouse, probably closing another $1 million deal. There were nights I almost gave up, nights I almost called her and begged to be let back into her world on her terms. But then I would remember my grandfather and the quiet passion in his eyes when he talked about art. I held onto that memory like a lifeline. This struggle was my own, and the life I would build from it, no matter how small, would be mine too. There's a certain kind of strength you only find at rock bottom, when you have nothing left to lose and only your own dream to hold on to. If you've ever had to build a life from scratch with your own 2 hands, just hit that like button. It's a quiet salute to all the builders out there. The lifeline I was clinging to became tangible one rainy Saturday afternoon. After months of grueling, soul-crushing work, I was at my lowest point, sitting on my apartment floor, seriously questioning every decision that had led me to this bleak reality. My mother's sharp words about me being a disappointment echoed in my ears. Feeling defeated, I finally opened one of the last unpacked boxes from my old life, the one simply labeled Grandpa Julian. Inside, beneath a collection of his old, worn-out paintbrushes, were his journals. They weren't just diaries. They were beautiful, leather-bound volumes filled with his elegant handwriting, detailed sketches of paintings he'd seen, and pasted-in newspaper clippings. For hours, I lost myself in his world, in his passionate essays about the power of art, his meticulous notes on auction finds, and his deep love for the stories that objects told. It felt like he was right there in the room with me, a warm, comforting presence against the cold Chicago rain lashing against my window. Then I found it. A series of entries, spanning nearly a decade, all about a little-known 19th-century artist named Alistair Finch. My grandfather was obsessed. He believed Finch was a hidden master, a quiet genius whose most important works had been lost to history. He had pasted in auction records of Finch's few known sales, analyzing the unique brushstrokes, lamenting how the mainstream art world had completely overlooked him. The final entry on the subject read, "The critics see only a minor artist. I see the soul of a generation. If someone could only find his lost London collection, the world would finally see what I see." Reading those words, a fire I thought had long been extinguished rekindled deep inside me. It was more than just a historical curiosity. It felt like a final quest, a secret mission passed down to me from the only person who had ever truly understood my passion. I finally had a purpose again, a direction. I would find Alistair Finch, not just for myself, but for him. My grandfather's journals changed everything. My dreary, soul-crushing job at the auction house was no longer a punishment. It was a treasure hunt. Every dusty box I opened, every forgotten canvas I inspected, was a potential clue. I began paying closer attention to the minor estates, the ones the bigger auction houses ignored. For months, I found nothing but dead ends, my hope beginning to fade. But I didn't give up. I felt my grandfather's belief in Alistair Finch fueling me, pushing me to look closer, to see the value that others overlooked. The opportunity came in the form of the Miller estate. An elderly recluse had passed away in a historic but crumbling graystone building, and his distant relatives, who lived out of state, just wanted the house cleared and sold as quickly as possible. They hired our small auction house to liquidate the entire contents for a low, lump sum, not wanting to bother with a proper appraisal. My boss, seeing it as a low-value, high-effort job, sent me to do the initial cataloging. The house was a time capsule, filled with decades of clutter and neglect. After a full day of sorting through the main floors, I finally made my way to the dark, musty attic. In a far corner, under a thick, grimy tarp, was a large, flat stack of what I assumed were empty, rotted frames. Almost dismissing them, I pulled back the heavy, dusty canvas. My breath caught in my throat. The painting on top was a stunning, moody landscape of the River Thames at dusk. The brushwork was unmistakable, the unique cross-hatching technique in the shadows, the bold use of color in the fading light. It was exactly as my grandfather had described in his journal. It was an Alistair Finch. My hands shaking with adrenaline, I carefully lifted it, and then I saw another, and another, and another, and another. It wasn't just one painting. It was a hidden trove, a stack of nearly 30 pristine canvases. It was the Lost London Collection. In that dusty, forgotten attic, I had just stumbled upon a multi-million-dollar secret. The moments immediately following the discovery are a blur. I remember calling my boss, his stunned silence on the other end of the line, followed by a frantic drive back to the auction house with one of the smaller canvases wrapped carefully in blankets in my passenger seat. What followed was a whirlwind that swept me up completely. Experts from the Art Institute of Chicago were called in. They authenticated the collection with trembling excitement. The news sent shockwaves through the international art world. The Lost Finch collection was the biggest discovery of its kind in decades. Suddenly, I was no longer an anonymous girl in a dusty archive. My story was everywhere. The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Art Forum magazine. I was the young art historian with the golden eye, the one who saw the genius her grandfather had always championed. Our small auction house, overwhelmed, partnered with Christie's for a special, dedicated auction in Chicago. As the discoverer, I was asked to help curate it and write the catalog descriptions, placing me at the very center of the art world's biggest event of the year. The night of the auction was surreal. The room was packed with the world's most famous collectors, all vying for a piece of the history I had unearthed. The bidding was ferocious. Paintings my grandfather had seen sell for a few $100s were now fetching millions. When the auctioneer's final hammer fell, the total for the collection was over $32 million. My commission, as the discoverer and expert who brought the collection to light, was life-altering. After taxes, I walked away with just over $3 million. In the space of a few months, I had gone from worrying about my next meal to becoming a millionaire, all because I had listened to my grandfather's wisdom and trusted my own passion. There is no better feeling than proving your worth on your own terms. If you have ever had to fight to make the world see the value in what you do, this space is for you. Subscribe and join a community that celebrates every single hard-earned victory. The money was one thing. The media attention was another. I was suddenly a sought-after expert, a media darling with an incredible rags-to-riches story. And it was the attention, the feature in the Wall Street Journal's art section, that finally got my mother to call me. She didn't call my cell phone, of course. She had her assistant schedule a lunch meeting, as if I were a new, high-value client she was trying to land. She chose a restaurant on the 95th floor of a Chicago skyscraper, a place designed to intimidate, a place where power was the main course. She arrived, looking impeccable, as always, and got straight to the point after the waiter took our order. "This windfall you've come into," she began, her tone the same as if she were discussing a promising but volatile stock. "It's significant. but it's also unstable if not managed correctly. The art market is fickle. You need a real financial strategy to protect it. I just listened, waiting for the inevitable pitch. I've taken the liberty of drawing up a proposal, she continued, sliding a sleek, leather-bound folder across the table. I'll manage your portfolio. We'll create a diversified investment strategy, real estate, emerging tech, commodities. I'll take a standard management fee, and I can guarantee a much higher return than if you just let it sit in a bank. I stared at her. There was no I'm sorry. No, I was wrong. No, congratulations, my daughter. I hadn't even been a millionaire for a month, and she was already trying to absorb my success, to turn my passion into another column on her spreadsheet. I gently slid the folder back to her, unopened. No, thank you, Mother, I said, my voice perfectly calm and even. I have my own plans for the money, plans that have more to do with value than with profit. The look of stunned, angry disbelief on her face was almost worth the price of the overpriced lobster salad she had ordered. My mother's cold, transactional offer was a final, clarifying moment. It proved to me that to her, I would always be an asset to be managed, a number on a spreadsheet. So I decided to make an investment of my own, not in stocks or commodities, but in a sanctuary. 2 weeks later, I closed on a penthouse apartment in a historic building on Michigan Avenue, just a few blocks from the Art Institute of Chicago. It happened to be on the floor directly above my mother's old office building, a fact that gave me a quiet, private satisfaction. The space was everything our family apartment on the Gold Coast wasn't. It had soaring, 16-foot ceilings and massive arched windows that flooded the rooms with natural light. Instead of cold, minimalist furniture chosen for its resale value, I began filling it with pieces that had history and soul. I used a portion of my commission to buy back one of the smaller Alistair Finch paintings from a collector, hanging it in the entryway as a daily reminder of my grandfather's unwavering belief in me. The largest room wasn't for entertaining guests. It became my personal library and study, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a comfortable armchair for reading. It wasn't just an apartment, it was a declaration of independence. It was a space built on my aesthetic, funded by my passion, and governed by my rules. My mother measured success by the view from her sterile office. I was building mine with the view from my own home, a view that looked out over the city that had once cast me out, but was now mine to claim. There's a unique power in creating your own safe space, a home that is a true reflection of you, not of someone else's expectations. We do. Subscribe if you know the profound peace of finally having a room or a life of your own, built on your own terms. My new life was private and peaceful, but I knew one more public confrontation was inevitable. It came 6 months later, on the opening night of the special exhibit, Alistair Finch, The Lost Collection, at the Art Institute of Chicago. The event was the talk of the city, a grand celebration of both the artist and the incredible story of his rediscovery. My mother was there, of course, holding court with the museum's wealthiest patrons, accepting congratulations as if she were somehow responsible for my success. A prominent arts reporter from the Chicago Tribune approached us, microphone in hand. "Miranda," she asked, "you must be incredibly proud. You're known for your tough, results-driven approach to business. Did Sienna inherit that relentless drive from you?" My mother gave the reporter her most practiced, predatory smile. "Absolutely," she said, placing a proprietary hand on my arm. "I always pushed Sienna to aim higher, to be ruthless in her pursuits. I believe my brand of tough love is what forged the determination she needed for a discovery of this magnitude. The old me would have stood there, silent and fuming, letting the lie stand. But the new me was done letting her rewrite my history." I smiled politely at the reporter. "That's a fascinating perspective," I said, my voice calm and clear. "But actually, the credit for this discovery belongs to my grandfather, Julian. He taught me that true value isn't always reflected on a balance sheet. He taught me to see what others overlook. My mother taught me how the financial world works, how to liquidate an asset for profit. My grandfather taught me how the art world works, how to recognize a priceless legacy. And in the end, it was the legacy that proved to be the better investment." I watched the reporter scribble furiously in her notepad, and for the first time, I saw my mother at a complete loss for words, her polished facade finally cracking under the weight of a truth she couldn't spin. That night at the museum, I didn't just reclaim my story. I found my true purpose. Listening to my mother try to frame my success in her cold language of relentless, profit-driven ambition, I realized what my grandfather's real mission had always been. It wasn't just about finding Alistair Finch. It was about championing the profound value of art that the market, in its blindness, had deemed worthless. My success had given me the power to continue his life's work on a scale he could only have dreamed of. The next day, I met with my financial and legal teams, not to discuss my investment portfolio, but to create a new one. I used a significant portion of my fortune $10 million to establish a nonprofit foundation. I called it the Julian Collection, in honor of the man who had taught me how to truly see. Its mission is simple but ambitious: to do for other artists what I was able to do for Alistair Finch. The foundation actively seeks out, purchases, and professionally restores the works of talented but historically forgotten or undervalued artists, particularly women and minorities who were overlooked by the art establishment of their time. We then work to place their art in museums and galleries, funding new research and publishing catalogs to reintroduce their brilliant stories to the world. My mother's entire life was about identifying undervalued assets and exploiting them for maximum profit. I decided my life's work would be about identifying undervalued art and restoring it for maximum cultural impact. The foundation became the ultimate expression of my grandfather's legacy and the ultimate rejection of my mother's worldview. It was my way of ensuring that other beautiful, important stories would not remain lost in dusty attics, waiting for a chance discovery. I would be the one to find them. So now, when I walk through the quiet archives of my foundation, I'm surrounded by the beautiful, silent stories of artists who refuse to be forgotten. It's in this space that I truly understand the outcome of my strange family revenge story. The ultimate revenge wasn't the millions of dollars, or the penthouse, or even that single moment of public vindication at the museum. The real revenge was proving that my grandfather's gentle, passionate worldview was not only valid, but in the end, immensely powerful and valuable. And that's the masterpiece, the real lesson I want to leave you with. My mother taught me that value is a number that fluctuates on a screen, something to be exploited. But my grandfather, and this entire journey, taught me that true value is constant. It lives in our passions, in our history, and in our ability to see the profound beauty that others are too busy to notice. The greatest masterpiece you can ever create is a life built on your own terms, designed by your own values. Don't let anyone convince you that your passions are worthless just because they can't assign them a dollar value. Sometimes, the things that the world overlooks are where the real treasures are hidden. I never needed my mother's approval. I just needed to approve of myself. And standing here, surrounded by the art that I saved, I finally do. If you believe that your unique way of seeing the world is your greatest strength, then this is your community. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we celebrate the stories of those who found their fortune, both literal and figurative, by following their own unique vision. Because your perspective is, and always will be, priceless.